speaker is Cooper Trendle from Burns. And as I shared, he drew topic number 23. It reads, is requiring a permit to clean a ditch on your farm overregulation or protecting the common good?
Right. Thank you for being here today. First off, I know it's kind of touchy with the technical issues, but you guys bear with us. And so, is cleaning a ditch overregulation or just protecting the common good? Now, I don't know where your guys' backgrounds come from, but personally, I've lived on a ranch my entire life. I know what irrigating undertakes. I know how much of a pain it can be. I know that nobody likes it. Nobody loves to do it, but you have to do it to get water to your crops. Now, overregulation, that term, especially right now with everything going on, is almost not understood. I mean, overregulation, the government right now is telling us who we can meet with, how many people we can meet with, if we can work, how long we can work, and if we might get a job back or not. But let's face it, it's cleaning a ditch, people. I mean, all you're doing is making sure there's no interruptions in your water flow, so you can get water to your crops, so you can make hay for your cows, for your livestock, or you can grow the crop that you desperately need in order just to make ends meet. Now, one thing that unfortunately has been happening lately is the DSL, or Department of State Land. Now, they have been enforcing this rule more strictly lately. The Farm Bureau recounts. Right now, you can only clean 50 cubic yards of material, whether that be silt, dirt that is fallen into your ditch and impeded its flow, whatever it may be. You can only take 50 yards out of your ditch in order to clean it. Now, you can get another permit, but that still only gets you up to 100 cubic yards of material that can be removed from your ditch and or irrigation system. So think about this. You're a farmer or a rancher and you're walking along your ditch and you see there's a pile of dirt that fell in from something, whether it be erosion or livestock coming in. Anyway, there's some dirt in there, but you're over your limit. You already got your 50 cubic yards. You can't move that dirt. So now the water is going to stop up in your ditch and it's going to flood your land. Now, we're kind of defeating the purpose of a ditch if we let that happen, because now not only is the water coming onto your land, it's not getting to your neighbors, which isn't going to make them happy, and it's ruining the crop that it could help grow with flooding. Now, the special permit for 100 cubic yards, that's a little easier to get. It's not that hard. You have to go through some paperwork and whatnot, but it's not that hard. The individual permit that lets you clean your ditches with little regulation, that is insanely hard to get. You have to go to the Army Corps of Engineers and get their okay. You have to go to the Department of Fish and Wildlife and get their okay. And after that, you might not even get it. And so it's really just a flip of a coin if you get it or not. Now, I wish I was talking about something that seems more important. I mean, we are just cleaning some dirt out of a ditch after all, which seems like kind of a basic thing to do. And I don't know where you guys come from, but from Harney County, where I come from, we don't get a lot of water. It's kind of like oil up here. We treasure it. It's a precious commodity that we take very good care of. And so if something is blocking a ditch and you're not getting that water, that could mean that you don't pay the bills that month, that year. You don't get what you need in order just to make ends meet, to make that farm successful. And so it corrupts your livelihood. It ends your way of living. It ends the family ranch that's been in your family for hundreds of years. And so it's really heartbreaking to see that just this simple little thing of making sure water gets to where it needs to go, making sure you can irrigate things is being regulated by a foreign power that may or may not know your circumstance, your situation, or even the best way to go about this. After all, we've seen in the past, the government does not know the best of everything, especially at first. And so I think it's very important that we remember and make sure that we are doing what we can to hold them in account so we can just, have our rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, just be able to make whatever we're doing work, whether that be a farm ranch or making sure our crops grow. So thank you.
Speaker, J.W. Diebold from Imbler. He has drawn topic number 15, which is, has Oregon's land use policy been beneficial and should it be continued? Go for it.
Am I good to go whenever?
You are.
All right, thank you. As I travel across Oregon, whether that be through the FFA, going to a competition or convention, a basketball game through my school, or just traveling around with my family to truly appreciate all the beauty Oregon has to offer, I like to look out the window and just appreciate everything there is out there. And one thing that I've always noticed is that clear divide between farmland and city. This was implemented during the 1960s and 70s due to the fact that Oregon's population was booming. Because of this, our government and legislature realized that in order to protect both the interests of the booming population and agriculture, we're going to have to develop some land use regulations. They did this through the form of two groups, the LCDC and DLCD. These two groups were created in the year 1973 and were tasked with creating a land use policy that would be beneficial to all. As I look back, I can clearly see in my eyes that it was beneficial to both those in the urban area and those in agriculture. This was due to the fact that they protected both groups, while also looking back on everything and making sure that these ideals were still beneficial through different task forces. But as times continue and our ideals change, we're going to have to change Oregon's land use practices in order to make sure that both groups are still well protected. As I stated, that when I travel around the state, I like to look out and see all that I can see in our beautiful state. This includes looking out over Oregon and seeing the divide between city and agriculture. As I mentioned, this was due to the beneficial system of Oregon's land practices, which was created in order to create zoning areas that made it so that large cities couldn't infringe, and even small cities couldn't infringe upon agriculture. While also looking back at these ideals and sticking to their core values throughout present times, they also sent out several different task forces in order to make sure that both groups were still being equally represented. One of these was Oregon Task Force on Land Use Planning, or known as the Big Look Task Force. This group was in the year 2005 to 2009. They traveled all across the state of Oregon, looking at both zoning regulations and how much cities were going to expand, while also noticing how much agriculture was going to be needed to feed these growing populations. Based on their ideals and research, they concluded that while Oregon's plan was slowly growing, it was still beneficial and what we needed during this time period. But as I said, times are beginning to change. As we look out across America, we can clearly see the bridge and divide between urban and rural America. Many in the urban settings don't look out and truly appreciate all that agriculture does for them. Now, this is a scary thought to me, as agriculture has always been a part of my life, and I want to keep it that way for myself and generations to come. But in order to continue this lifestyle of agriculturalists, we're going to have to change Oregon's land use policy in order to make it stricter and less forgiving for when it is actually infringed upon. This will make it so that we can protect agriculture and protect the urban environment. So while it has been beneficial, there is going to need to be change as times continue. As I look out and plan my future for what I'd like to do with it, I still see myself traveling all across Oregon and still appreciating all the beauty it has to see. But that divide between urban and farmland is still there. This is due to the fact that Oregon's land use development was edited and made a little bit stricter to protect both. my children and grandchildren are able to appreciate everything that Oregon has to offer and continue a way of agriculture that I hope to last far beyond them. Thank you.
Our third speaker is Devin Prim from Santiam Christian, and he has topic number 21, which reads, what alternative to cap and trade can Oregon agriculture leaders put forth to address climate change? You can go.
All right, thank you. Republican walkout, state of emergency, hashtag timber unity, executive order. All of this because of House Bill 2020. House Bill 2020, Oregon's House of Representatives cap and trade bill, is designed to limit the amount of carbon to promote the benefit of climate change in Oregon. People throughout the state are outraged at this bill that is complex and challenging and costly to producers across the state of Oregon. However, as the days go on, we will continue as humans to produce carbon and need to find a way to manage this. Cap and trade, however, is not the most efficient way of managing this, as it only focuses on one method of managing carbon. While one way to manage carbon is to limit the amount produced, another is to promote the amount that is consumed. This can be done through the sequestration of carbon. Carbon sequestering is the process of capturing and containing carbon within plants. This promotes the natural plant processes and can consume carbon that is produced by Oregonians. This is our greatest possible tool that we have to promote to Oregon legislature to limit climate change instead of cap and trade legislation. As Oregon, we have an advantage with so much lush, beautiful green forests and plants throughout the state of Oregon. According to Dave Nowak, the U.S. Forest Service's Northern Research Center member, the most efficient plant to sequester carbon is the Douglas fir. Fortunate for us as Oregonians, we have 2.5 million acres of Douglas fir in the state of Oregon. Each of these trees is able to sequester 14 tons of carbon within its first 100 years of life. This would enable us as Oregon to manage the amount of carbon produced without intervening in the lives of Oregonians. Everything we need as agriculturalists is available. It's simply our duty to present this to Oregon legislature. At the Capitol Day, I got to hear former legislator Roger Bayer speak to us about cap and trade legislation. He informed me that as is, 60 to 70% of the carbon produced in the state of Oregon is already sequestered by our forests. This already reaches the 2035 goal for cap and trade legislation on carbon limiting. Through the process of incentivizing agricultural carbon sequestration, we can benefit the timber industry, grow the economy, generate revenue, and still have an impact on climate change. We can benefit the economy through the increased exchanging of money through hands. This generates economy, generates revenue, and benefits our Oregonians as a whole. Additionally, this will benefit the timber industry. As the growth of trees or other plants is incentivized, more Oregonians will be drawn to the timber industry, which will grow it and enable it to become larger and more efficient to benefit Oregon as the years go on. Additionally, this will generate revenue for individual citizens. It is estimated that 1,000% of money invested can be returned on tree farmers who grow Douglas firs. And this is just one of the trees and one of the ways to sequester carbon. But overall, this still comes back and limits carbon production. Climate change is the ultimate goal that must be addressed. Climate change is a real issue and must be addressed. However, cap and trade is not the way to go about this. As a complex, challenging, and costly system, it is simply not feasible. As Oregon, the 5th most efficient in low carbon production state in the United States, a green state, we need to find a way to limit climate change while benefiting Oregonians at the same time. This can be done through carbon sequestering, which will benefit Oregonians and continue to benefit to reduce climate change. Thank you.
Welcome, and thank you for your flexibility.
Yeah.
Our fourth speaker is Sidney Stables from Amity, and she has drawn topic number 11, which is how do we bridge the rural and urban divide in Oregon? All you, Sid.
Okay. Salt and pepper, two very different seasonings that come together in your boiling pot of soup. Apples and oranges, two fruits with very different tastes, yet come together to make the perfect fruit tray. Peanut butter and jelly, two delicious ingredients on their own, yet together they form the perfect sandwich, and one of my favorites. What does salt and pepper, apples and oranges, and peanut butter and jelly have in common? The urban to rural comparison. All of these different foods are divided by categories and types. But what does it really mean to divide? Mathematically, division is taking something and breaking it up into smaller segments. We divide apples and oranges by slices and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches by halves or quarters. But how is Oregon divided? And what makes our urban and rural communities so different? Political views, economic differences, and issues in the region. The debate over urban and rural communities has been going on for decades. This divide is vast in Oregon, but how do we bridge it? First, we must address the issues in Oregon. Political parties. This is the major split that first comes to mind. Our urban and rural communities are split by political party choices, but this wasn't always the case. In 1996, Multnomah County had 59% of their voters a part of the Democratic Party. During this same time period, Eastern Oregon region had 56% of their voting population also registered as Democrats. Our party splits in each region were fairly equivalent more than 50 years ago. However, the tables have turned. Politics have progressed and time went on. Year by year, the voices of Eastern Oregon voters have been silenced. Oregon's political landscape has changed dramatically, and the urban and rural divide could not be more apparent than it is now. Multnomah County is more liberal than ever, with 71% of voters registered as Democrats. And the Eastern Oregon has gone the opposite way, with 41% of voters as registered Democrats. What was once a 3% registration divide among political parties in Multnomah County and Eastern Oregon is now more than 30%. Not only is the political aspect a cause for division in Oregon, but economic differences are the root of the problem. In addition to the Republican Party becoming more popular among the east side of the state, numerous timber towns and logging communities have too. Democrats lost their support of timber towns due to spotted owl issues that have arisen in our past. And the party as a whole became more of a preservation party, which excluded all of rural Oregon. With the increase in the timber and natural resource-based east side of Oregon, the urban community became more and more distant. And now it is a head-to-head battle of the rural and urban Oregon. With different ideals and economic values, these parts of Oregon have stepped foot onto the battlefield. Production versus consumption, roots to the ground and generational farms versus manufacturing and infrastructure. All of these differences have arisen, and what was once a conjoined playing field is now a division between the state. Due to political party differences, differing economic goals, and issues on both sides, it's unknown territory from one to the other. Urban voters are trying to change aspects of the rural community without knowing anything about the voices, and farmers' voices are silenced. They need to be heard. However, with Portland transitioning from a logging town to population and wealth center of Oregon, change and solutions to this problem aren't coming easy. Complex problems call for complex solutions. However, there is hope to piece together our state. A program called the Urban Rural Ambassador Institute is the start of a long process. Colleges from Eastern Oregon University and Portland State have partnered up to provide students with an insight about the different communities. They provide a program that addresses the communities and issues in the area. The program consists of a 6-credit course that takes place over 10 days. Students spend 5 days in the Portland metro area and 5 days in Eastern Oregon, studying issues particular to each region and learning about new things that they have never learned before. A focus on the principles and methods of collaboration. The information students brought back from the experience was immense, and they learned a lot about the divide in Oregon. The goal of the program is to create a new pipeline of future leaders. It challenges students, whether from Pendleton or Portland, to provide creative solutions that meet the needs of our diverse communities and support the local thriving economies. Bridging the gap in Oregon, more programs such as these need to occur in order to do that. Over time, the gap will heal. Information and issues from both sides need to be spread to the public because that's the best way to stay informed. I hope that in 50 years from now, I can look at Oregon as my peanut butter and jelly sandwich. No divisions, no differences, just a couple of ingredients coming together to create the perfect sandwich. What will you do to help bridge the gap between the urban and rural communities? The future is right around the corner, one PB&J at a time. Thank you.
Caitlin Schmidt from Cascade has drawn topic number 6. Does Oregon's reputation as a green state attract businesses? Go ahead, Caitlin.
No matter which side you're on, climate change is a hot topic. It's not something you can bring up at work, to your barber, or frankly, at the Thanksgiving table. Climate change, no matter what side you're on, is heated. But the one truth in this whole argument is that someday we will run out of fuel. It may not be next Monday, and it may not be until 50 years from now, but eventually that resource we've had for so long will disappear. The question is how will we get on without it? That is a question that Oregon has taken head on. Oregon's reputation as a green state goes beyond Northwest Territory. It is known from across the country. Oregon has taken big steps to make us known as a green state. For example, our green industry employs over 55,000 Oregonians today. That is 50 times more employees than that are employed in the state of Oregon that work for the fossil fuel industry. This job has an 11% annual growth rate attached to it. Besides this, 11,000 of these jobs can only be done in rural areas. Because of this, we can obviously see that green business is big in Oregon, but not only sustainable energy. We have seen how many renewable resources we have around us. From our hydroelectric dams to our renewable trees, Oregon is poised to join the green economy. But why is this such a big deal? Why is this such a hot topic in the business industry? That is because of the changing demands of consumers, not only within the state of Oregon, but around the country as a whole. It is getting more and more common to find products that brag recycled packaging, renewable, or eco-friendly. These are terms that consumers devour when it comes to looking for items to buy in store or online. This is how businesses in Oregon have changed. All around us, we see renewable resources and renewable packaging. From our plastic bag ban all the way to the popularity of electric vehicles, Oregon is doing pretty good on jumping on the whole green phase. But the question is how can agriculture jump on this bandwagon? It's obvious that we can't just employ a fleet of Priuses to do the fertilizing and the planting. That is simply not possible. And it's also not possible for us to abandon half of our equipment because they're not eco-friendly. The way farmers can join this bandwagon and help contribute to the green business that is booming in Oregon is by making small changes. Whether that's changing your normal clamshell packaging to grapes to where it's 50% recycled material to joining in on your local farmers markets. Little changes like this are appealing to consumers. Changes like this can help Oregon stay on the ball and continue to push the green business that is thriving in not only Oregon's economy, but in the economy overall. Thank you.
So this is Jenna Wallace from Hermiston, and she has drawn topic number 18. Should growers be compensated by the federal government when foreign policy results in trade barriers that effectively close off export markets for their products? It's all yours.
Thank you. As a kid, I remember making the trek to my grandparents' ranch at least once a month to help branding and working the cattle, giving them vaccines, and any other help I could provide on the ranch. Their ranch was an operation of about 2,000 head of cattle at the beginning of 2010. However, they were third-generation farmers and ranchers, and this operation has been going on for quite some time. Now, it's important to note that this operation was about 2,000 head of cattle at the beginning of 2010, but over the past decade has dwindled down to about 1,000 head of cattle. And that's because of the foreign policy and trade barriers placed on our nation today. Now, before I get started with the tariffs and the trade barriers, it's important to know what a tariff really is. A tariff is essentially a tax placed on a import or export, either coming from the United States to another country or coming into the United States. And this is extremely important and vital in our economy right now. The changes made on the operation at my grandparents' ranch has been heavily affected over the past 10 years, like I said before, but it's been the last 3 years that have been astronomical. From 2017 to 2019 is when President Trump pulled out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership with countries like China and Japan, and they've also began a trade war with China. That slowed down at some point last year, but has then again picked up. And so that's what's making operations and growers in Oregon having such a hard time through these foreign policy issues. These tariffs started out at about 10%, but they've only rose and been created upon more products in the United States that are being exported out of the country. And what's important to know is that a lot of other countries aren't doing this. The United States right now is being heavily affected by it because we are some of the leaders in this trade war. So when foreign policy changes and trade barriers appear, farmers and ranchers are still there doing their tasks every single day, and we need to realize that if we're being asked, should compensation be relieved upon these farmers and ranchers when foreign policy is created that they can't control up in Washington? The answer is yes. How can farmers and ranchers create this kind of change when the solutions are being created in Washington? Now, I've talked a lot about the cattle on my grandparents' ranch and how I've been affected by it. But in Oregon, there are over 200 more commodities than just cattle. Right now, 90% of the wheat grown in Oregon is being exported to other countries around the world. And the main export market for that is Japan. Well, with the TPP, or Trans-Pacific Partnership, being closed off in 2017, that isn't an option anymore. And effectively, their markets are closed. 99% of the hazelnuts grown in Oregon, 99% of the hazelnuts grown in the United States are grown in the state of Oregon alone, leaving 1% for the other nation. And these tariffs have been placed heavily upon the United States from China as retaliation to this trade war. So not only are we harming our economic relationships, but then those countries that we were harming are coming back and retaliating against us. If we're doing this, farmers and ranchers are probably not going to see positivity in a really long time. Now, it's important to note that the exports have plunged from, our exports to China have plunged from $25 million in just 3 years ago, now down to 7. This is a huge and drastic change. And if farmers and ranchers are the backbone of our country and our safe food supply, they need to be compensated. The US has so much potential, and we already are the safest food supply on the planet. So if we were to end these trade barriers, end these trade wars, and help farmers and ranchers with this kind of relief when this comes up that they cannot control, we respond with federal aid. Now, just last year, the US has responded with about $28 billion in federal aid for farmers and ranchers. And this is amazing. But when you think about all of the farmers and ranchers in the United States and the fact that one piece of machinery can cost up to $500,000, this isn't doing the job. So when we take a look at what foreign policy looks like in America today, and we realize that farmers and ranchers are the backbone of our safe food supply and that they cannot have an effect on the foreign policy made all the way in Washington, we need to realize that they need some kind of compensation. Thank you.
Today is Nolan Carson from Sutherland. His topic is number 25, which reads, what tools should Oregon hazelnut producers adopt to increase domestic consumption of their product to offset the rapid increase in acreage? All you, Nolan.
Growing up in Western Oregon, one of the largest cultural landmarks I know of is Interstate 5. Anytime I need to visit family, go to a sporting event, or even just compete in an FFA competition, I usually have to travel up Interstate 5 to get there in the first place. Yet, over the past few years, I've noticed a difference in the landmark that surrounds the roadway. Driving through the Willamette Valley, it's clear to see that long gone are the row crops that used to be there, and now they are being replaced with hazelnut trees. And this is for good reason. Over the past 10 years, the state of Oregon has tripled the amount of hazelnut trees it has. With this, that means that Oregon farmers are moving quickly to fill the demand that we see for this product and ensure that it's there in the first place. Yet, with such a rapidly growing industry, it's clear to see that we are going to need to be certain about the next steps forward to ensure that there is a domestic market for this crop. One of the biggest problems that we see is that with this crop, there are a large amount of it is sent overseas, but when we battle things such as trade wars, different economic standards, and the instability of a growing industry, it can be hard to fight. Yet, when we consider innovation, advocacy, and marketing, we have a solution to this problem. When we look at the hazelnut industry as a whole, there are two areas that seem to be excelling out of it. One, of course, is here in the state of Oregon, yet the second is in Urdu turkey. Oregon produces about 5% of the world's hazelnuts, yet Urdu turkey produces 70%. Obviously, Oregon isn't number one in this commodity, but we're definitely working to get there. The hazelnut growers of Oregon have recently developed a state-of-the-art facility in the town of Donald, which rapidly produces their processing of this crop, which makes them able to get it out to consumers quickly. On top of this, we've also seen Oregon State University develop new research to help battle diseases that these trees face. One of them being the Eastern filbert disease is a different one that they've been able to breed trees to withstand so that they're able to survive further. By implementing these types of practices, we know that the Oregon hazelnut industry is only going to grow rapidly thanks to the innovation that we're seeing. Yet, one of the best tools we have at our disposal is the use of advocacy. Obviously, we're seeing all types of trade disagreements with the United States right now, and a lot of them are affecting the hazelnut industry. Currently, we send about 1/4 of our crop to China, but we have a problem with this when we consider that China puts a 62-cent per pound tariff on all the hazelnuts that we send to them. With such unstable relations, it's clear to see that a domestic crop is needed much more efficiently to get to. So how do we get there? Well, one of the number one steps we can take is by reaching out to our representatives. If we do this specifically at the federal level, we have the highest chance of making an impact. Our senators, Ron Wyden and Jeff Merkley, have the most influential ability that we have in the state of Oregon. So by reaching out to them and showing the importance of this industry, we can advocate for hazelnuts at a wider variety than we normally could. When we put this in addition to the state leadership that we already have with the Oregon Department of Agriculture, we have the possibility of truly pursuing an issue that we can solve throughout this. Advocacy is perhaps the biggest tool that we have to solve it, and doing it through the legislative branch is the best way for us to do this. Yet, one of the quickest and easiest ways to do is to impact the mind of the consumer. Marketing is the biggest tool for any crop that we see, and it's obvious that the hazelnut industry is going to be able to utilize this. The hazelnut growers of Oregon have developed 4 new baking items, as well as several different ways to package their crop and able to get it to the consumer. By slowly introducing it to them and making sure that it becomes part of the American consciousness, we'll be able to see repeat purchases of this crop. So we're not just reliant on industries like a hazelnut spread. Yet, when we introduce another factor to this, such as social media, we have a much wider variety of people that we're able to aim at. With social media, the impact is enormous. You have an audience that is as large as you make it, and it's truly impactful. Just the Oregon FFA Association alone has over 10,000 followers across their social media platforms, which means that there's 10,000 people that are willing to hear what we have to say about the hazelnut industry. When you introduce this to other Oregon agriculture associations, such as the Oregon Farm Bureau or the Hazelnut Growers of Oregon, there can be a large amount of impact here. Also, when we consider that there is a big market for this to come from due to the coronavirus, it's clear to see that these farmers are going to need more help than ever. Yet that marketing has the ability to protect these farmers from the effects that they're seeing and make sure that their crop is able to be sold. Obviously, this industry is growing rapidly in the state of Oregon. Yet, it's important that we implement the changes of innovation, advocacy, and marketing to ensure that there's a future for this. Hopefully, as everyone drives down I-5, we can ensure that there will be hazelnut trees lining our windows for years to come. Thank you.
So our final speaker this afternoon is Cinch Anderson from Grant Union. He has drawn topic number 19, which reads, given the annual growth rate in timber stands within the federal forests in Oregon, are current forest management practices resulting in sustainable federal forest? And if not, what practices need to change? Good luck, Cinch.
Thank you. All right. Put yourself in the shoes of a local farmer or rancher in Eastern Oregon. You come in for lunch that day and you get a phone call telling you that you need to get your cattle off of your Forest Service allotment because there's a wildfire headed that way. Now, instantly, you get super nervous and you're worried that maybe you won't get all your cattle out. Well, this whole thing resulted in the mismanagement of that forest. So when asked if the management practices that are being used right now are helping to keep a sustainable forest, the answer to that is no. And here's why. In the past 15 to 20 years, there has been 4 different mills closed down in Grant County, Oregon, where I am from. There used to be 5 working mills, and now there's only 1. Now, the reason for this is the Forest Service said, we're taking too much timber off of the land. We need to be keeping more of this timber because it's going to help with wildlife habitat. Now, speaking from a recreational standpoint, yes, that makes sense. But when you go to look at maybe cattle grazing and stuff, it doesn't make as much sense. us ranchers, we have to be able to go up into that land and we have to be able to move our cattle. We have to be able to get in there, and that timber, if we aren't managing it properly, if we're leaving too much timber on the land, it's harder for us to get around. It's harder for hunters to get in there and be able to spot these animals and hunt them, and to create that correct chain, we have to keep more timber out of there so that we are able to see what we're doing and everybody else is able to see and be happy about it too. Now, when you go to look at this from a logging standpoint, of course those loggers want to be logging. They want that timber, they want it coming into their mill because it's going to help them out in the long run. Now, there is another solution to this that the Forest Service tried to come up with, and that's thinning. So rather than logging this and taking it to the mill, we're going to thin this timber, we're going to cut it down, but we're going to leave it here. Not clear cutting it by any means, but thinning it out. Well, the problem with leaving that timber there is, so when that hits the ground, that covers up a lot more area than it did when it was standing upright. And so what that does is that creates a lot of forage that maybe the deer, the elk, the wildlife, the cattle, whatever it may be, cannot get to that forage because that tree's laying down. So really, if you're thinning, you're creating more of a distraction on the ground there because there's more forage that's not able to be reached. So then some people try and say, okay, well then why don't we just go back to logging? Well, the problem is these Forest Service management plans restrict logging. They say that logging should not be happening because it's really hurting the environment, when really in the long run it's helping everyone out, not just the local ranchers, not just the recreationalists, but it's helping the wildlife in general out. So that logging is actually helping, and right now our forest management plans are not letting us do that. So that brings me kind of back to where I was going with that point of thinning and everything. So that grazing is also a big part of managing these plans. See, grazing is how a lot of these local farmers and ranchers, and I mean, I've experienced this firsthand. We personally have a Forest Service allotment that we're using, and without that Forest Service allotment, we wouldn't be able to run as many cattle as we do because that's where we put them during the summer. So really, the real problem here is we just need to update our Forest Service management plans. The Forest Service, they do the best that they can to try and make all the groups happy, when really right now they're more with the people that are maybe more against logging, when we can meet in the middle where we're not clear cutting it by any means, but we're doing some logging and actually helping out everything, not just the wildlife, not just the people that are grazing, the ranchers and stuff, but also the recreationalists. So that's probably the best solution that we can come to, is just everybody come together and meet in the middle, and these Forest Service managers can do that. Now, the best way to go about that is, if you're a local farmer or rancher or somebody that has interest in that, go to your local Forest Service building and just sit down and talk to them and look at their Forest Service management plans and see what that looks like in terms of logging and grazing, and really all those different aspects of managing the forest properly and creating a sustainable forest with good timber stands. And don't be afraid to give them your input on how we can make those timber stands better and how we can manage the forest better as a whole. Thank you.